Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Namaskar and welcome, dear learners. Again, we are meeting today to discuss about Indian poetics. In last session, we got introduced to word and phrase poetics and Indian poetics. We tried to understand what does exactly mean by Indian poetics. We discussed about the definition, we tried to understand the word and the phrase. Today we will try to have a very brief introduction of components of Indian poetics. Dear learners, here we keep in mind that we are going to have brief introduction of it. We are not going to discuss in detail, that we shall do later on. The first component of Indian poetics that we'll study today is a Rasa Siddhanta. When I think of Rasa Siddhanta, literature as well as performing art, being a dancer that comes in front of me. So close to my heart. Now you see, whenever we see that for what do we do things? To get happiness or bliss out of it? Rasa is somewhat like that. Be it literature, sculpture, paintings, performing art, dance, theatre, anything. If a rasa nishpatti is not there, the art somewhere ends up in zero. So today we'll discuss Rasa Siddhanta. Being Indian, rasa is not limited to art. Foodie Indian people have ras in food also, and there are various fruit juices. Yes, rasa is a juice of life that we get through art. So today we study now Rasa Siddhanta. The earliest exponent of Rasa Siddhanta, that means theory of aesthetic experience, is Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni. Since the work is on drama, Rasa Siddhanta is founded on 4 types of acting. Whosoever had understanding or have learnt performing arts, they must have studied it. The 4 types of acting: Angika Abhinaya, that is non-verbal expression of gestures through body movement to depict the emotion. Second is Vachika Abhinaya, that is verbal expression, that means dialogues or use of language, words like tone, pitch, etc. Third is Aharya Abhinaya, that means costumes and other things, stage properties, etc. to enhance the emotion. And fourth and very important is Satvika Abhinaya. That means involuntary non-verbal expression like wide eyes, change of face, color, trembling of hands, etc. to express the deepest of emotions. When I'm explaining this, I'm reminded, as a classical dancer, before going to stage, before starting dance, we always pay a tribute to Lord Shiva, Nataraja. Angikam bhuvanam yasya vachikam sarvavangamayam. Angikam bhuvanam yasya vachikam sarvavangamayam aharya chandra taradi tvam numah satvikam shivam. 4 types of acting. After Bharata, several noted scholars like Bhattanayaka, Lolata, Shankuka, Abhinav Gupta, Mammata, and even Anand Vardhana have added to Rasa Siddhanta. When we talk of Rasa, earlier there were 8 and then 9 Shanta Rasa was added to it. So the best or maybe very beautiful part of Indian poetics is that scholars, acharyas, later on when they studied it, they gave their comments on it. They added some, they omitted some, they interpreted some in very different way. That really makes Indian poetics very interesting. The origins of Rasa theory is in the 6th chapter of Natya Shastra, the Rasa Sutra. Bharata writes, Vibhavanubhava Vyabhichari Bhava. The sutra means that the aesthetic pleasure of an emotion happens by the integration of three elements. Which are those three elements? Vibhava, Anubhava, and Vyabhichari Bhavas. Now let us try to understand these three terms in detail. First comes Vibhava. Vibhava means something that causes the rise of an emotion. If there is emotion of happiness or maybe karuna, this sadness or anger, there has to be some reason of it. So vibhava means something that causes the rise of an emotion. So vibhava is a cause or determinant of an emotion. It is hetu, that means reason, objective, or maybe nimitt. It is the objective condition producing the emotion, like a set of objects, a situation, or a chain of events that would cause certain emotions. The primary purpose of Vibhav is to create the awareness of the emotions that the author intends to Vibhavas are. Now try to understand. Vibhavas are of two types. One is Alamban Vibhav and the other is Uddipana Vibhava. Now you see, when we study Indian poetics, it is very important to understand certain Indian or Sanskrit words. So here try to understand. One is Alamban Vibhav, Alamban, depending on something. And second is Uddipan, that encourages or that stimulates. So Alamban Vibhav and Uddipan Vibhav. Alamban Vibhav means the person or persons with reference to whom the emotion is manifested. Uddipan Vibhav means the external circumstances that help in enhancing or occurring of that emotion. Let us understand this with an example. The hero and the heroine, or maybe protagonist, male and female, see each other for the first time. They are in a garden. The cool, fragrant breeze is blowing. Obviously, when we have example from Sanskrit literature, so much of romance is there. The cool, fragrant breeze is blowing. The birds are singing. The hero and the heroine are attracted towards each other. Here, the hero and the heroine are the Alamban Vibhav, and the garden and the breeze and the singing of birds or maybe moon are Uddipan Vibhava. So Uddipan Vibhav, it is an external stimulus. It is not the protagonist. Anubhava means the expressions. Now after Vibhav we come to Anubhava. Anubhav means the expression. In the above example, the gestures, smile and glances of the hero and the heroine would be Anubhava. How do you come to know about that emotion? So whatever communicates those emotions, that is Anubhava. The gestures are expressive of what is going on the heart and mind of the two persons here. And third term is Vyabhichari Bhavas. They are transient emotions which are not primary emotions but reinforce the primary emotions. They are also known as the Sanchari Bhavas. Especially in classical dance, it is performance, it is more known as Sanchari Bhavas. For instance, a woman eagerly waiting for her husband or beloved may feel anger for his being late, may feel anxious thinking that something might have happened to him, may feel happy at the thought of endearing words he would say upon arrival. She may be feeling these entire emotions one after the other. They are not the primary emotions, but they reinforce the primary emotion, which is Shringar here. So the primary emotion is Shringar. Rasa is the Shringar. Whatever emotion as a part of it comes and goes away, they are Sanchari or Vyabhichari Bhavas. Now, the interplay of Vibhavas, Anubhava and Vyabhichari Bhava leads to Sthayi Bhava. When these three bhav they get together, they lead to Sthayi Bhava. So Sthayi and Sanchari Bhava. There are 8 Sthayi Bhavas discussed by Bharata in Natya Shastra, and there are 8 corresponding rasas. Now Sthayi Bhava and rasa respectively, I will say Sthayi Bhava and Rasa respectively, if you look at, dear students, dear learners, kindly pay attention. Rati is a Sthai Bhava. Shringar is Rasa. Has or Hasya, that is Sthai Bhava. Hasya is a Rasa. Shoka, Sthai Bhava. Karuna is a Rasa. Krodha is Sthai Bhava. Raudra is a Rasa. Utsaha is a Sthai Bhava. Veer is Rasa. Bhaya is a Sthai Bhava. Bhayankar is a Rasa. Jugupsa, that is Sthai Bhava. Bibhatsa is a Rasa. Vismaya is a Sthai Bhava. And Adbhuta is a Rasa. I hope you understood what exactly mean by Sthai Bhava and corresponding Rasa. After Rasa, understanding Rasa in brief, we will move to the next component, that is Alankara Siddhanta. Dear students, when you will study later and later units in detail about Rasa, you will be able to understand every Rasa in detail with certain examples. But right now, we are just trying to understand the component. So now we come to Alankar Siddhanta. The Alankar, which is also known as figures of speech, that school believed Alankar as the essence of poetry. Alankar means, in its broad sense, Kavya Saundarya, or the charm or beauty of poetry itself, and its narrow sense means the figure of speech like simile or metaphor. My dear learners, we know it very well. We have jewelries, we have alankars for party, for marriage, for picnics, for certain functions or farewells. So we have different kinds of costumes, outfits and alankaras, jewelries. In the same way, here alankar means figures of speeches. Up to the 10th century, poetics was known as Alankara Shastra, which shows how important Alankara was for the early acharyas, and that indicates also the importance of embellishments in poetry. There was a time when Indian poetics was, it was limited to understanding of Alankara. So that really makes us understand that it used to be so important for acharyas, scholars, gurus. Bharat mentions 4 alankars in his Natya Shastra, and he discusses 36 lakshanas or bhushanas which have similarity with alankara. Don't get confused with all these terms. Dear students, you will read once, twice, and you will understand it quite easily. The reason is that we are rooted, all of us are rooted in Indian culture. And whether we say bhushana or lakshana, we are familiar with these words. Bharata differentiates alankars from lakshanas. He says they are different. For him, lakshanas are something integral to kavya, whereas alankaras have additional embellishments. Try to understand. He was comparing lakshanas to samudrik lakshanas like lines on the palm or slim waist or bright forehead. Now, if we go again, and if we have a glance over the other side of we have palmistry, we have face reading. So for him, Lakshana was related to what the lines on our hands say, what lines on our face or forehead says. So for him, Lakshana was Samudra Lakshana. Alankars are like earrings or maybe a necklace or maybe bangles. The former were in the body itself, whereas the later were external embellishments. Now you see, maybe the lines on my hands or maybe on my forehead, those things are part of my body. But when matter comes to jewelries, alankar, they are external. They are not part of my body. I can remove them. I cannot remove lines from my face. Bharata has mentioned 4 alankar. They are upma, that means simile, Rupaka, that is metaphor, then Deepaka, that is condensed expression, and Yamaka, that is repetition. Bharata did not attempt a detailed study of poetics. Bhama and Dandi are the first scholars to attempt a serious and independent study of poetics, with an independent investigation into the language of poetry and alankaras. Bhama can be regarded as the exponent of this school. Other proponents of this school are Udbata, Dandi, Jayadev, Rudrat, etc. Bhama does not accept the view of externality of the Lakshanas and considers them as at par with Alankars. He says they are the same. So he has discussed 35 Alankars, excluding the sub-varieties, the others also. So here we can see, as earlier I told you, that you see all the critics, scholars, acharyas, they agree to accept, but their interpretation, variations, they are huge. The sub-varieties, which includes most of the 36 Lakshanas discussed by Bharata. Bhama took the word Alankara in its literal sense. Alankar literally means that which gives sufficiency. That's alam karoti, that is Alankara. Alam karoti Alankara. So Alankara gives sufficiencies to poetry to be called poetry. Dandi had 38 Alankars. Udbhat had 41 Alankars. Rudra had 68 Alankars. Vamana had 31 Alankars. Mammata indicated 67. Ruyakka said 79, Vishwanath told 84, and Jaidev said 100. We can see the variation, but everybody agreed to it. And that what really indicates richness of Indian poetics. Alankar is divided into two main types, if we try to understand. Shabda Alankar and Artha Alankar. Now you see, the words are self-explanatory. Shabda Alankar and Artha Alankar. Shabda, which is related to word, and Arth, which is related to meaning. Shabda Alankara means figures of speech based on the word, and Artha Alankara means figures of speech based on the meaning or the sense of the word. Anuprasa is a Shabda Alankar, for example, as the beauty of the Alankar is the alliteration or maybe repetition of the same sound. If we replace a word with a synonym, the beauty is lost. That means the beauty, Alankar, is in the use of that particular word, not in the meaning. Similarly, simile is an example of Arthaka Alankara. Here the beauty emerges out of the meaning of the word and not the sound. Try to understand all this also here, that they are Ubhaya Alankara, which is a mixture of Shabda Alankara and Artha Alankara. A simile with alliterative sound or maybe repetitive sound would be an example of this. A poet may employ more than one Alankara at the same time, which then is example of Mishra Alankara. A poet may try to make it more Alankarit language or poetry more beautiful using two at a time, and that it becomes Mishra Alankara. Here, try to understand the example of Anuprasa. Mudita Mahipati Mandar aaye, Sevak Sachiva Sumanta bulaye. Now you see, ma and sa. Here we can see the repetition of letter ma and sound sa. So ma and sa, they are getting repeated. Now this sa and ma repetition of sound. Now try to have a glance over this another example. Chanchala charu chandranayane chalayatascha me chittam. The two restless and beautiful moons, here moons means two eyes, on her face make my heart restless. Here we have one figure of speech, that is Anuprasa, repetition of cha sound, which is a Shabda Alankara, and at the same time other figure of speech is Utpreksha, which is an Artha Alankara, where the eyes are compared to the moon. So we have here example of Ubhaya Alankara. Bhama said that poetic composition is not possible without alankaras, and alankar comes out of vakrokti. Dear learner, a new word comes to you, that is vakrokti, that is oblique expression, and atishokti, that is hyperbole. For him, there cannot be kavya without alankara, and alankara is not possible without vakrokti. Dandi differs here from Bhamaha, and he holds that view that poetry, there can be poetry without vakrokti, he says. It is not compulsory to have vakrokti, then only poetry possible. For him, alankara could be of two types, vakrokti and swabhavokti. Now try to understand, vakra ukti and swabhava ukti. Swabhava ukti, that is natural expression. Other scholars also have enumerated alankars and suggested divisions. Now you see, if you try to understand this terminology, they are self-explanatory. Most scholars, when we say vakrokti, so vakra ukti, swabhav ukti, that is natural ukti utterance. Most scholars of this school also accepted the importance of rasa, dhvani, guna, etc. We find differing views about the relative importance of alankara in poetry, but there is a consensus agreement that alankaras are what makes poetry, as they impart a special character to language of poetry. After this, now we move to the third point, that is Riti Siddhanta. Now you see, Riti, Raghukula Reet Sada Chali Ai, Prana Jai और वचन न जाए, रीति. Vaman is considered to be the founder of Riti Sampradaya. We may speak Vamana also, but generally Vamana instead of that Vamana is the pronunciation. Yes, Vamana is considered to be the founder of Riti Sampradaya. However, the concept of Riti was not a completely new Siddhant in Indian poetics. It is Vamana who developed Riti as a systematic school of poetry, and that's why he is remembered whenever Riti is discussed about. Vamana probes deep into the nature of poetry and considers Riti to be the soul of poetry. His famous dictum, Riti, Ritir Atma Kavyasya. Riti is the soul of poetry. Riti Atma Kavyasya. Riti is the soul of poetry. It is explicit assertion that it is the Riti that differentiates poetry from other forms of writing, like philosophy or maybe other sciences. Now you see, everybody agrees to a concept, a philosophy, but their interpretation is comparatively or maybe giving importance to certain terms that differs from one to another. Riti means style or distinctive way of presentation adopted by the poet. Now you see, whenever we make some statement, very simple, a layman makes a statement, it is not that poet talks about all emotions out of this globe, universe. He brings all emotions or feelings from some alien land. No, he talks about human emotions, what I feel, what you feel, what everybody else is feeling. But the way he presents matters the most. And that's why he says that style or maybe distinctive, very different way of presentation, accepted, adopted by poet is important. Other words used by other scholars are marg, gati, panth and prasthana. Now you see, they are comparatively similar. They talk about gait, way. Earlier Dandi had referred to two bargas of representation, Vedarbi and Gaudi. Vaman added third one to it, that is Panchali. Other scholars added more ritis to it. Rudrat added Latya and Raja Bhoj added Avantika. And taking the total to 5, they kept on adding till it reached to 5 ritis. For Vamana, riti means a particular arrangement of words and phrases. Vishishta Padarachana. Visishta, extraordinary, something very special. Padarachana, arrangement of words. So riti is result of phrasal and verbal organization in a work of art. Work of art means piece of literature here. Vamana has divided the organization in mainly 3 ways. The first is asamasa. Now we are familiar with the word samasa. We have studied in grammar, we have studied samasa. In Sanskrit grammar, we have studied samasa. The first is asamasa. As the name suggests itself, self-explanatory. There are no samasa or compounds in this style. There are no compounds. It creates madhurya and is apt for depicting Shringara, Karuna and Shantarasa. The second is Madhyama Samasa, where only small compounds are used. Asamasa, then Madhyama Samasa. where small compounds are used. And the third riti is dirgha samasa, where the large compounds are used. Dirgha is long. This is helpful in depicting Veera, Bibhatsa, or Raudra Rasa. Dear students, learners, whenever you're sitting, now after understanding all these things, whenever you read a piece of literature, try to relate these components with whatever you are reading. Try to interpret these components through that literature or literary piece. Vamana puts emphasis on gunas. Now, gun and dosh, we are familiar. This is terminology, we are familiar. Gunas and doshas. Gun and dosh. Gunas determine the particular riti, and they are both inextricably bound together, and they create beauty in poetry, whereas alankaras enhance the beauty created by gunas. Thus, Vamana gives importance to Riti over Alankaras. Now, you see, as I told you earlier, he says that Riti is more important than Alankar. Now, there was a time Alankar was synonym of Indian poetics. And now, again, the view comes that Riti is more important than Alankara. Gunas are the qualities of poetic excellences which create beauty in poetry as against doshas, which are blemishes of poetry. Something add to richness of poetry, meaningfulness of poetry, and something, it harms it, it blemishes it. They are doshas. So gunas are an essential condition for poetry, and doshas should be avoided. Bharat and Dandi both had enumerated 10 gunas. Vamana retained the same 10 gunas, but he created two sets of the same 10 gunas under two categories. Now you see, the same gunas are same. The titles, the names, the interpretations are the same. But he said Shabda Guna and Artha Guna. We are again visiting Shabda Alankar and Artha Alankar. The gunas are associated with Shabda, the word, the language, or it is with Artha, that means meaning. Now, Shabda and Artha. For example, Shabda Guna and Artha Guna. You see, the words gunas are same. The gunas are same. Ojasa, Shabda and Artha. Prasada, Shabda and Artha. Shlesha, Shabda and Artha. Samata, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Samadhi, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Madhurya, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Sukumarta, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Udvarta, Udarta. Udaratva, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Artha Vyakti, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Kanti, Shabda Guna, Artha Guna. Thus, Vamana has explained gunas in terms of Shabda, that is word, and Artha, that is sense of meaning. For example, Prasada, that is lucidity, as a Shabda Guna gives lucidity to the text, becomes easy to read, and Prasada as an Artha Guna gives appropriateness of meaning. After this, we come to the next Siddhanta, which is Dvani Siddhanta. Vaman's contribution is that he gave currency to a thought which recognized and emphasized both the soul of poetry and the body of poetry. What makes the poetry beautiful and what enhances the beauty of poetry, that he discussed about. This paved the way for a new theory which is theory of suggestion. Theory of suggestion, that is Dvani Siddhanta. Dvani is primarily concerned with the levels of meaning. It views suggestion as a special function of language which is exclusively found in poetry, as it differentiates it from other non-literary uses of language. Acharya Anandavardhana really propagated the Dvani theory, but he considered Dvani to be the soul of poetry and not Riti. Now again we are, moving further. As I told you earlier also, I am repeating it, I might be re-repeating it, that for someone Alankar is the most important, For one Acharya, Alankar is the most important. For another Acharya or scholar, Riti is important. Here Anandvardhana says that Riti is not important, Dhvani is important. All other theories more or less concentrated on the external, that is expressed meaning, but Dhvani school pays attention to the suggested meaning. It's not a direct interpretation, it is more about suggested meaning. So, a Dhvani Kavya is a work of literature where the expressed meaning is subordinate to the suggested meaning. Now, you see, if we just think of it, whenever we really cherished a piece of poetry, a piece of maybe literature, the maximum thing we really enjoyed was something between the lines, that is suggested meaning, or maybe we may say beyond the lines. When this is Dhvani, when a scholar propounds a new theory, he partakes of his predecessors and adds his own contribution to the tradition. It is not that he always introduces something very new out of the blue. He takes something from the predecessors and adds either something new to it or new interpretation to it. This tradition of Indian poetics keeps flowing like a river, taking new turns while still retaining the original flow. And my dear learners, that what really makes Indian poetics so interesting and so rich a reservoir of knowledge that India really possess. So coming back to Dhvani. So Anandvardhana did not negate the importance of rasa or alankaras, but believed that rasa is not made, it is revealed. It is revealed. The object of kavya is the ultimate enjoyment of the Sahridaya Bhavaka. Sahridaya Bhavaka. That is empathetic reader, which is the result of rasa. Now you see, we watch a horror movie, we get fear. We watch tragedy and we cry. We watch comedy and we laugh loudly because we are Sahridaya Bhavaka. Sahridaya Bhavaka. We feel it. Empathetic. We feel what the character is feeling, what the writer is feeling or describing. The manifestation of rasa is best when it is done through Dhvani. The just suggested meaning rather than the expressed meaning adds more beauty to it. Indian poetics has always put emphasis on the word and its meaning. The meaning is divided mainly into three types. First is abhida, that means primary meaning. Second is lakshana, that is secondary meaning, or we may call it derivative meaning. Third is vyanjana, that is tertiary or suggested meaning. The three types of meaning, in fact, are the three functions of a word. It denotes, that means abhida. It indicates, that means lakshana. And it suggests, that is vyanjana. For instance, the sentence, the ball is in your court. Does it mean that really ball is in your court? In Vachyartha, if we say that the ball is in the court of the person addressed. But if we look at it in a different way, that is from Lakshana, it means that it's your responsibility to take the next step or to make a decision. Now I am no more responsible. The ball is in your court. We know that the speaker is not talking about the ball or the tennis court, but about the responsibility. It is the Vyanjana that makes poetry. The literal meaning has its importance, but it's just like an outer body of the kavya. The suggested meaning really what makes the soul of poetry. Yes, the soul of the kavya is suggested meaning. Bhavaka, that means a sensitive reader, viewer can understand and appreciate this meaning quite well. My dear student, I am convinced about it that whenever next time you will be reading any poetry, you will be viewing, cherishing any performance, you will try to understand that this is a Vachika Abhinay, this is Angika Abhinay, this is Satvika Abhinay, this is Aharya Abhinay. You will say here is Dhvani, suggested meaning, Vakrokti is there, Rasa is there. And this is what really makes Indian poetic study worth. Thanks for being with me and thanks for being with Indian Poetics. See you soon in the next session. Wish you very happy learning.
स्वाध्यायः